I'll be honest, I don't have a clue what's going on. Berta's public negotiations are sending us all into spirals, but when David Ornstein broke the news that talks are advanced between Arsenal and Sporting Lisbon over Viktor Gyökeres, it looks as though Arsenal have made their call on the centre forward to go and get. I'll admit something else too. As you all know, I've erred on the side of Benjamin Šeško over the past year, and I also feel the call to go for Gyökeres is born from being priced out of Šeško. And I also have the slight inkling that the saga may not be completely over yet. But as this past week has shown, I'm not even going to bother trying to predict timelines and pursuits this summer. However, what I can do is what I try and do best. Take Viktor Gyökeres, scout him in detail, concentrate on his superpowers, his imperfections, the nuances I feel that need to be outed, and then take that knowledge into an examination of his fit, tactical, cultural, and my opinion for Arsenal. Welcome back to the Harvey Gratian YouTube channel. I'm so glad you found us or are joining us once again. And this is the second time round I've scouted Gyökeres now. But I'll be honest, similar critiques, for good reason I think, have done their rounds again and again. But for me, it became this time about drawing back the risk of that becoming a veil to cloud my judgment, doing my best to look with refreshed eyes, and I really think you're going to enjoy this video. Whether you're a Gyökeres advocate, a Gyökeres cynic, or someone completely indifferent, because remember, we are all here to support Arsenal. Anyway, philosophy aside, let's dig in. It's right to start with what Gyökeres gives you on the ball, in possession, what he's done as well to score 54 goals across all competitions last season for Sporting. He is at his most potent when he's hanging on the last line like this, drifting and then spearing into channels with a fury and a bustle that won't let anything get in his way. These runs are immediate, without hesitation, and are matched by a Sporting team who look to hit the channels instantly, to launch attacks in this way. Gyökeres may even camp out offside for large parts of the game. Analysing striker movement, I think at times is a hard task. It's more you just know it when you see it, if that makes sense. I'm not sure Gyökeres quite has maybe the unpredictability of a Haaland or a Šeško who have different tools, but unlike Šeško and more like Haaland, Gyökeres, when he decides to go, he commits fully, no questions asked, and that's a different type of forward to the ones we have, a relentless one, a quality which I know I have touted among the ones I look and sought after in my forward search. It's borderline insane, I think, just how many goals of his come when he's pulling onto the shoulder into this left channel, opening himself up to face goal and receive on the run. We'll get on to the dribbling and the finishing in just a moment, but if he can't create this kind of orientation, this is where Gyökeres then uses his strength and physicality to a positive effect. He'll back into the defender, wait for them to get a little bit greedy, and either roll them with a scary effortlessness or bounce them in the shoulder to shoulder. We'll dive into his back to goal play a little further on, but you can see with that license to drift how it gives him a little bit more room to breathe in these kind of situations. Once he drops it off to Pedro Gonçalves, he just sets off, and once he is motoring, his momentum builds and builds the longer he goes on for. He actually gets faster, you could argue, the further he runs, although I only have a feeling to go with that. He should probably square it in this example, but there's one thing on his mind, and that's find the angle to shoot. If these situations are where he is best placed to exert himself physically, when he does have the chance to, he will snatch at the opportunity. And one of his most, I think, appealing qualities is this idea of him as an opportunist. And I'll expand on that in a second. But we can see here how he's by no means limited to that left-hand side running. And these diagonal runs are just as surging and disruptive. Here, he's left 1v1. He backs into his man, almost forgetting about the ball. He can't roll and strike down the line. So instead, he picks out the left winger very well. Benfica's block was stretched, disorganised, and the facilitation of wingers here is something to keep an eye on. This is one of the better examples, I think, of him bringing others into the picture. But now that he's got himself gearing towards goal, particularly on the approach in that left channel, how does Gyökeres attack the finishing moment or the dribble to prepare for that? He's not a 1v1 demon per se. He's not always the most supple or disguised. I mean, I'm not going to stand here and argue with you over how easy it sometimes is made for him in Portugal, as you can see on your screens. But once he is motoring. Gyökeres has got actually really close control, and he has that knack that it's probably slightly intangible and hard to explain, of just hanging on to the ball. He might try and dart through a gap between two defenders, there might be a ricochet, a half challenge, but amidst the kind of roughness on show here, it's really hard to knock goals like this. There may be a few extra steps and touches, but the hunger, the direction, the control, the angle finding, and the strike are all superb. And it's all about manufacturing the angle for that shot for Gyökeres. And I think he's homed in a formula that allows him to create enough separation either side to make the shot, at least in Portugal. And the shot feels inevitable most of the time. There are signs, I think, of intelligence to this as well. It's hard to show through freeze frames, of course, and I apologise for that. But here, he waits just a fraction longer before cutting in. It comes after a big hoof long, of course, but that shimmy inside, even though he's looking for it constantly, is always snappy. Defenders do know this, obviously, and if the angles are blocked off, he's not necessarily got the burst to find his way out of a very strong double up. But if he can feint, like he does here, he can move the other side and get a shot off with his left foot just as strong, just as powerful, just as precise. This is not a criticism, simply a comparison where I think Kai Havertz can be a little bit too upright in that preparation of the shot and lack the decisiveness. I think Gyökeres is totally the opposite. It's funny though, isn't it? Because I'm about to get onto some criticisms and earmark potentially the more one-dimensional aspects of Gyökeres' play. But in all this discourse and all this debate around him, I think we've forgotten, and this is key to emphasise, we've forgotten that this guy is just a really good finisher. And it's here that I want to spend a little bit of time now, looking at his striking, his hungriness, his good kind of scrappiness, that opportunistic sense I talked about, and his lack of hesitancy in front of goal. On the screen now are some goals he's scored from more settled play, which he does score more than he's been credited with often. You can see how chaotic some of these sequences are. We're talking ricochets off defenders, mishit clearances, loose bobbles and drops, but Gyökeres never switches off, which means he's always in a very, very good position to take these little windows first time, mostly ripping through the ball with quick slams or swivels in the box. And when you combine this alertness with the power he can generate, it's worth real consideration. And it extends to that snap, I think, at the top of our press, because if we can start to cash in some more on those high turnovers with Gyökeres hanging in the open space in the middle a little bit, he can start to pull left, immediately face that 1v1, use that decisiveness, that power and that precision to fire quality shots off. And if he can do that, that is a genuine bonus. And the mercilessness of some of these finishes are also really apparent. Rifles into the corners from quick openings or slams across the face of goal in the right channels are more examples of how he can sort of dispatch shots and really punish a defence at a moment's notice. A feeling that in the squad we probably haven't mastered yet. You simply don't stop some of the efforts here that I'm showing you. He is capable as well, I think, of cuteness, whether that's a little lift or an opening of the boot, but this type of variety is something I would naturally like to see more of. I'm sorry though, I am sorry, because like in every Scouted, we have to comment on a player's drawbacks or maybe where they can improve a little bit, and Gyökeres is not the crowning jewel of strikers. I hope though that if you give me a chance to explain why that is and how that informs my opinion of him as a whole. His abilities, or lack thereof, in the air have been exhausted now, but not actually why he struggles to assert himself or assert the levels of physicality and repeatability that he demonstrates stretching back lines. Do you remember the Mosquera Scouted? Mosquera's problems were that he essentially tries to fight the attacker and backs himself so much on the ground that the actual headed duel becomes an afterthought. Gyökeres has an equal case for not always needing to leap and to use his head, but when the ball is launched forward towards him, he literally just stands there, tries to be awkward and unmovable, and that's how he goes about these aerial duels. And genuinely, in the countless games I've now watched of Gyökeres, I haven't actually seen him jump yet in these situations, these launches from the back. He'll back into the defender and back into the defender some more, and it's not like he's actually challenging for the ball at all. Maybe he's just letting it hit him and allowing it to drop for a teammate. This, of course, limits build-up options, and certainly means a team like Arsenal, who launch so regularly from Raya, will need to use a different mechanism. Sporting themselves often go long and promote their captain Hjulmand high up the pitch, so Gyökeres can then run in beyond him. But this also has, I think, a real bleed back into the box situation and settled play. Now, I've just analysed why Gyökeres isn't actually as ineffective in the box as I think he's been labelled with before. However, with the spaces in the centre more cramped than ever in some of our games, with fighters and beasts patrolling the dangerous middle, Gyökeres, if on his own, is pretty dulled, I think, as a weapon in these situations. This is the only clip I found of him actually climbing over someone in the box. Don't get me wrong, Gyökeres has scored headers. He hasn't scored many, it's not his trade, but he's even scored great ones in the past. But there isn't the same sense of making it yours that he displays with the finishes with his feet we can see here, as he latches onto a volley from a half-space cross. He's got all the relentlessness to do this, but for some reason it just doesn't inform his heading. We've spoken about some of those hardships that he has with his back to goal. Remember, it's all about how he can roll the defender. So now I want to speak about how he sort of brings others, or tries to bring others, into play. The more facilitaty stuff, which needs a physical platform, yes, but it also focuses on intelligent, selfless movement, touch, flick-ons, dribbles, chaos, etc. Here, I think he also leaves things to be desired, if I'm honest. His first touch can be bouncy, the ball can get stuck under his feet. He's not poor at bringing others into play, by any means, but especially when he's turning, I think. From that back-to-goal position, it always feels like he's fighting against momentum, and then he starts building that momentum back and getting into stride. Again, if he can't roll you, he's not someone who's going to swivel quickly. He's certainly got an intent, I think, to play passes, and he can execute them. But for me, the problem is, it seems a little bit reactive and in the spur of the moment, a bit too much at the moment. On the left again though, he has got some really nice slip balls and cutbacks into the half space, and once again, that persistence to his game comes through. If we cast our minds back to when Sporting took on Arsenal in the Champions League, my recollection of the game was that Saliba and Gabriel pretty much nullified him. I think on rewatch, they did win that battle, but Gyökeres did have a few little moments. Free kick wins, or the one that we do all remember, how he rolled Saliba not off a big high ball where he has to compete in the air, but that channel hit, and then doubled down on that with his physical advantage he had on Kivior and unleashed an effort onto the post. How does this all come together? Does this all come together at Arsenal? Is this going to work, Gyökeres? First of all, I have no concerns about his application, his willingness, his ability to repeat his runs at max intensity, and the same goes for his pressing. Right now at Sporting Lisbon, he sort of hangs high and saunters around before springing into life on a loose pass. That style, yeah, probably changes at Arsenal, but I don't have any real worries. As for the tactics board, I think a twinning partnership with Kai Havertz is not off the cards at all. It might be in our 4-2-4 setup and creating those 1v1 moments we saw earlier, or it might be at the tip of a diamond, where Kai can provide that aerial release valve, the box occupation when Gyökeres drifts wide, the selfless space creation for him. But this does, and I'm not going to argue with this leaves other qualities missing and essential to add elsewhere. Place Rodrygo in the mix, for example, and you've got more of that Jesus central dribbling and 1v1s if he's allowed to drift in field whilst Gyökeres pulls out. But there is a question as well of adding some more passing to this team, particularly with Madueke looking like he's on the way in, which there will be a scouted on, don't worry. So for me, this takes Eze, I think, away from a brilliant supplement this summer, potentially to more of an essential signing. His abilities on the release, for example, and in general, the rotations, I think, on our left side, they're not going to be exactly the same to when Jesus is there. They won't be as subtle. Martinelli will be dashing through the middle more to latch on, and if things do slow down, he'll be left to shift around and hanging the box, and hopefully be able to show his own aerial game in the box, which is really underrated still. What about the right-hand side, though? I'm worried, of course, about not maximising Saka's whips and White's overlaps. I think Gyökeres gives us a runner to hit for those slip balls into the channel, with that striking across goal that we currently don't have and haven't had for a while. But at the moment, that opportunistic scrappiness seems like the biggest source of goals, or the biggest way he's going to score goals against the more settled, deeper blocks. For these more mid-blocky sides maybe, I think Gyökeres gives us disruption and he gives us urgency in the runs, once more a kind of ruthlessness in those one-off chances. But aside from this, I don't know how much he can provide for himself, and that's sort of another factor to consider. Because we've been talking about the term block breakers for a while, haven't we? Gyökeres gives us those runs. Maybe not raw speed, but certainly a physicality that grows over bigger distances. He gives us a relentlessness. He gives us certainly more of a reference and someone who lacks hesitancy and can dispatch chances and moments on those high turnovers. But in terms of generation against low defences, we still lack that real provocation on the dribble, the killer crosses or splitting passes to make our chance creation still inevitable. And look, Gyökeres is going to score goals for the reasons I've cited, but for also the same reasons, I don't think maybe his ceiling is quite as scary as some expect nor hope. Predicting translation to the Premier League is always a really hard ask. But if those clear mismatches that he has in Portugal aren't as readily available, I don't think we're quite getting maybe the gluttonous goal scorer in Portugal, more a scrappy opportunist with the potential to be lethal in those moments, who can help our turnover to shot ratio, but isn't quite the all-game state productive force that maybe we still require, and probably not a pure reference centre-forward because of this and because of these situations where he is slightly blunter in attack. But it also seems like we are conscious of not having to overpay for Gyökeres, if I read the reports right, because he isn't someone who's going to transcend tactics or systems, but he is, and he is, regardless of overall opinions on the signing, he will add some valuable individual qualities all the same, potentially inject some new lifeblood into the attack and refresh some dynamics that really need that. So if the price does end up reflecting that, although I think we might be leaving other options in this position on the table, although he's not necessarily my first choice, then ultimately it is a net positive that we haven't let imperfection get in the way of actually going to do something. And who knows, maybe my conservative attitude is proven totally wrong. And I like to hope that I've shown you, especially those of you who are massive advocates of Gyökeres, why that might be correct and how he can help us. So Victor, thank you as well for being so hungry and so willing to play for us. And as long as there are no more twists in the tail, let's get behind him. Let's support this group who have got us so close and are trying so hard to make that final step. Let's keep pushing on the other business that we still have to and we must do at the same time, because Madueke looks like he's in. We've got the here we go, which further toggles up the speed of our attacks, of course, our shots too. He's a much more self-sustaining carrier, I think, but there's still some things to add if we don't want to risk hitting those familiar stumbling blocks once again. Nothing is project derailing, and it's always about assessing when we come to the end of the window. But I hope, whichever side of the debate of Viktor Gyökeres you're on, this video has helped you. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. See you later.